Alright, for this tutorial I'm going to show you how to set up the little dots exercise project and how to do it specifically in GIMP. Notice that I'm working on a Macintosh computer, but the process should be just about the same if you're working on a Windows computer as well. First off, do make sure you've got access to GIMP. It's available both on Windows and Macintosh, and you can find them on the lab computers in the basic design room if you don't have them as well. The next thing you'll need to do is to locate and download the squares JPEG that I'm providing for you. There should be 6 evenly spaced squares, and this is where we're going to work out our compositions for the first part of this exercise. To open it up, first thing, launch GIMP, and so you should see the little work area, but nothing inside the center portion of it. To open up the squares, it's simply a matter of dragging it onto the work area, and you can see this will be where we work at from here. Next, we can use our paintbrush to come up with a variety of little dot compositions inside of each of the squares. If you look at the top left-hand corner, locate the paintbrush, which looks like a regular paintbrush, and if you don't see it, it's hiding underneath maybe the pencil or the airbrush tool. But with it selected, you can go underneath here and you can choose black as your foreground color. Black is set to default, but if it's something different, this is where you can change it. The other thing we need to do is if you go to the far right hand side, make sure you've got the large black circular paintbrush selected. The final thing to note is underneath the middle portion of your left hand side is where you can adjust the size and even the spacing or the hardness of your brush. The size of it, if I increase by clicking and dragging or typing in the number, you can see my paintbrush will get much larger, or if I drag it the other way I can get it much smaller. What you're going to do is to create a composition using a variety of different dots inside of each of the little squares. So if I increase the size, you can see I get a larger brush. Obviously you wouldn't want a brush that's so large it covers up the entire area, so I'm going to make mine a little bit smaller. That looks pretty good. And I can set that as my larger or my foreground composition. And then we'll go a little bit smaller than this. And I can set up a midground and even smaller for other things with that. So the gist of this exercise is to develop a variety of compositions that have contrasting weights, foreground, background, sizes, whatever fits for your composition that we're going to use for the second idea that we have. Now, if you make a mistake and you need to undo something, there's a couple of things you can do. There is an eraser tool. It's located next to your little paintbrush, and it works just like a paintbrush. You can change the size of it, then you can go back over and erase away whatever you have, then select your paintbrush and repaint whatever you need. Or, if you want to get real fancy, look for the little double arrow that's in between your tools up here at the top. This will give you a set of history that lets you step back and forth and see exactly what you create when you create it. So whichever method is easiest for you, just make sure you go back to your tool options and you can change up your paintbrush and continue working through your composition for each of the different 6 that are here. From here, the next thing you need to do is we're going to create a composition of 2 different images or more based on the preliminary compositions you do with these dots. So that'll be the second portion of this video. Oh, one last thing before we jump into the second part is we'll need to save this so that you can turn it in and email it to your teacher. If you go up to File, let's go down to Export As. This way we can export it as a different type of JPEG. Now at the very top, make sure to change the name of it to a file that has your name on it. And you can still call it squares if you want to. And we want to save this as a JPEG. Now towards the bottom, yours may look slightly different from what I have, but if you click on the word Select File Type by Extension, this will give you a large list to choose from. And let's just scroll down until you find the JPEG image. This way you can save it as a simple JPEG and we can export it from here. It'll ask you to have some options to here. Just make sure your quality is nice and high, so I'll keep it at 100%, and then we'll do export, and that's where it will save. Now whenever you save something, make sure you know where it's saved to. In my case, I saved it to the desktop so that I know where to find this, so when I need to turn it in, I won't have to go back and resave it from there. Now let's jump into the second part and use some images that we can create a composition from. Alright, in the second portion, we want to be able to create a composition from a variety of different images. Now in my case, I've chosen 3 different pictures, something that can be large, medium, and small, and something that I can change around. So in my case, I've got a landscape that's got a big tree, I've got a picture of a barn, and I've got a picture of a horse. Yours can be whatever you want it to be depending on what your teacher tells you to do. The first thing we need to do is to create a new document. So I'm going to go back to GIMP, and I'll go up to File and create a new document. By default, everything's measured in pixels, so make sure you click on the px and change it over to inches. And this is where you can type in 8.5 by 11. Now if you want, I guess you can rotate this to be a landscape by clicking on here, and that'll be 11 by 18. 8.5, 11 by 8.5. The main thing is, once you get it set up, you can say OK, and this will give us our new document to work from. The first thing we need to do is to import and bring in all of our different pictures. Now in my case, I've got all of mine saved to a nice folder. So to place them in here, I'm going to say select my little landscape and just drag it on and place it inside of this area. The first thing you'll notice is that this is a very large image. It's larger than my working area. So I need to be able to scale this down so I can see what I'm working with. In order to scale, we need to locate the Scale Transform tool. If you go up to your toolbox, go to the very top right-hand corner of your toolbox area and hover over this one until you can see or click on there it is, the Scale tool. Notice that Shift S is the keyboard shortcut. Now with this tool, you should be able to click on the picture and drag it down. And make sure to hold down the Shift key to keep everything nice and proportional. There we go. This will move it and scale it down. Now as you do that, you can see you may need to choose your Move tool, move it back into place. But simply choose your Scale tool, click on it, scale it down until you get it just the right size that you want it to be. Then we'll choose our Move tool and we'll place it right here nice in the center. Let's do the same thing for our other images that we have. Again, I'll go to my images. Let's open up the barn. I'll drag it on. You can see my barn's not terribly too large, but if I need to scale it down, choose the Scale tool, click and drag until you can see it inside the area. Place him using the Move tool. And let's do it for the horse. Click and drag the horse on. This horse is way too large, so I'll choose my Scale tool. Click and drag. Then I'll choose my Move tool and move it nice and in the place too. So once you've got everything scaled down to where you can see each of the images, the next thing we need to do is to erase away the background of the image, and so that we can see the horse or what the different parts of the objects that you have. So to erase away the background of this horse, we're going to choose the Eraser tool. It's hiding next to your paintbrush tool. And just like the paintbrush, you can change the size of it and even the hardness or the fuzziness of the edge. So for instance, I'm going to make my eraser just a little bit larger, and I'm going to bring the hardness down a bit so that when I erase, you can see how it gives me a fuzzier edge that looks a little bit more crisp and clean. Now, the thing to remember about the Eraser tool is make sure you're on the correct layer. If you look over on the far right-hand side, you can see all of the images that we've been adding have automatically added to their own layer. I've got the horse layer selected, so if I click and drag along this layer, you can see how it automatically erases away just on that layer itself. Now, if you need to, you can go very quickly with a larger brush. In this case, you can see I'm going pretty quick. But there will be some smaller areas that you just can't get to that's going to be very difficult to get into, little nooks and crannies. This is where changing the size of your brush and making it smaller to click and drag to get inside of those smaller areas helps out as well. Another thing is if you don't want your background images, the images on other layers, getting in the way, you can click on the little eyeball and turn off the visibility for those layers. So in this case, they're still there, but I've turned off the visibility of the barn and my little landscape. So now with my smaller brush, let's make it a little bit bigger, I can go in and I can clean up fully the edges of my horse. And for the sake of time, I'm going to go very quick with this. You slow down, take your time, do a good job with it. And remember, if you ever make a mistake of this, you can always go up to Edit and Undo, Command Z, or you can go to your History panel and erase it away and step back and forth with this. Now that I've got my horse kind of outlined, let's make it a little bit smaller. Get in between here. I can choose my size of my brush, make it much larger, and let's clean up all these extra bits. In this case, I'll set my hardness back to 100%, so I can very quickly and easily get rid of this. So take your time, go through, and cut out each little part of your composition. Make sure to do a good job and not have any leftover little bits that are around the different edges of the parts of your composition. I've done this for the horse. Now I'm going to turn off visibility for it. Let's select the barn layer, in this case this one, and I know it's highlighted, so now when I click and drag I can erase away the background of my barn. And I'll take just a few moments and do this as well. We've jumped ahead. I've got my horse, I've got my barn. I really don't need to do this for my landscape since this is my background layer, but if I wanted to, I could go through and cut out the tree or different parts of the landscape. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep this one the way it is. Next, let's build our composition based on the little compositions that you had on your dots to match a composition for here. In my case, I'm going to kind of make it up as is. So let's say I wanted my tree to be the largest area. I can keep it large right here, but I need to select my barn, so I'm going to turn on visibility for it, and I need to scale it down and place it inside of my area. So with the barn layer selected, I can then go up and locate my scale tool, and I can click and drag it down, and I can resize it where it needs to be. Now if I click on the center, you can see this is where I can move it into place. So now I've got a large, a medium, and we'll hit return to lock that in. And I'll turn on my horse layer, select the horse layer, and again I've got my scale tool selected. I can click and drag. I can make my horse be nice and small and put that off in the background of my composition here too. Or if I needed to make it larger, I can put it in the foreground, place him large up here and erase away what's necessary. So using the scale tool, moving it around, placing it where it needs to be, selecting the appropriate layers. So with this one, if I needed my barn to be larger, I can do that and change up my composition to work through as well. Work through each of the different compositions. I believe 3 different compositions are what you're going to be creating. Once you're finished, it's a simple matter of saving this as a JPEG as we did before. We'll go up to File, down to Save As. Again, make sure your name is on it, so I'll do Ben Ivy composition number 1. I want to choose a different file type, so clicking on the name of the file type, I got the wrong thing. I'm going to hit cancel. Not file save. Let's do file and export as, not save as. Now that we got export as, we'll do select file type, and here is where we can choose the JPEG as the option that we want from here. Now that we've exported, I know mine's going to be saved on the desktop. We'll say OK to any of the options that show up, and this JPEG is what I would upload to the teacher for this project or exercise composition with this. Once you've finished with everything, of course you can close out GIMP by going up to File and Quit. You don't have to save any of the changes if you don't want to, but if you do save it, you can save it as a GIMP file to be opened up later on for other compositions or on another computer.